What's going on YouTube? It's Vinnie here, and today I'm going to show you guys how to replace an AC compressor on a 2007 to 2011 Honda CRV. I do want to mention a disclaimer before I start this. I had the car in the shop at the Honda dealership to diagnose the AC system for me. They came back and told me I needed a new AC compressor, and that price was just astronomical. So I decided I'm going to do it myself. But before I took the car out of the shop, I asked them to recover all the Freon and drain the oil out of the AC system for me, because I don't have an AC machine to do it. It is illegal to vent it out to the atmosphere, so I would never recommend doing that. Take it to a certified shop that can recover the Freon correctly for you guys. And then once it's all recovered and the system is empty, you're free to replace the AC compressor. Another little disclaimer, I'm not responsible for anything you guys are doing. This is just an example on how I'm gonna replace the AC compressor. And like I said, the system is empty, so I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys just the physical removing the AC compressor and installing it. I don't have an AC machine to show you guys how to recharge it and everything, so you're gonna have to bring it to a shop once you're done installing the AC compressor to complete this job. So once I'm done installing this AC compressor, I'm setting an appointment up with Honda, and they're gonna take the car in for me and pull a vacuum on the system, make sure there's no leaks. Then they'll add a little bit of that oil with the dye in it to check for leaks if there ever was any, and then they'll charge the system up with the correct Freon. And one more thing added to that disclaimer, you can't start this job until you have the Freon recovered out of the system. So if you're planning on doing this, just plan to have a shop recover all the Freon and the oil out of the AC system before you do this. If you were to take off the bolt that holds on the high side or low side line on your AC compressor while it's charged up, you can get extremely injured, and it's highly illegal no matter pretty much where you live, because you're venting that to the atmosphere, which is a big no-no. So do not do that. Make sure your system's correctly recovered before you start this. All right, so now that we got that all explained, I'm gonna show you guys the first step. So the first step for me to make this job a little easier was to get the front of the car off the ground a little bit. So I used some ramps, I drove onto them. You could also use a car jack, but you just wanna lift up the car in the front a little bit, because you're gonna be dropping the AC compressor right out the bottom in the front on the passenger side. Next step is going to be to start from the top. We're going to move some things out of the way because we have to remove the drive belt that's attached to the AC compressor. First things first, there's a little tab on the back of your power steering reservoir. You're going to pull that tab out, preferably with a clip tool or a screwdriver like that, and then you're going to lift out the reservoir.
Pry that tab back, wiggle this up. There you go, disconnected.
Now you're going to have two 10mm bolts down here on this bracket that you can remove to actually get the bracket out of the way. So if you look at the bottom of the power steering reservoir, there's a hose that goes down, and there's a clip that actually goes into that bracket. I'm gonna remove that first. There we go. To show you guys that clip down here, that clip right there was around this bottom hose. You just get a flat head and kind of peel it apart. So with that out of the way, take these two 10mm bolts out. All right, now with that bracket out of the way that used to hold the power steering reservoir, I tucked the power steering reservoir off to the side, and then you're gonna get a 14mm wrench, which is the one that's on that pulley, the tensioner pulley right down there. That's a 14mm, and then I just got another wrench. Since I don't have a long 14mm, I'm using a 22mm wrench to help assist pulling on it. The box end's on the pulley, and then the open end of the 14 is right there. Then I get a 22 or whatever other size you got, and I'm gonna slip it over like that on the wrench. So then when I pull on it, you can see it moves the tensioner. See that? And that's how you'll get the belt off. I do want to note you can do this also from the bottom. It may be easier for some people to do it from the bottom, but since I don't really have a lift, I found that it's easiest for me to do it up top. So I'm going to pull on that tensioner towards the front of the car and then pop the belt off right up top, and that should loosen the belt everywhere else. All right, so I actually pulled the power steering reservoir the other way, get the wrench in between to really get a good pull on that tensioner. And then just work the belt off up top. A little tricky, but it comes off, trust me. All right, pull the wrench out of there. Now you can tuck the reservoir the other way. Be careful of your power steering line hoses as well. Now that that's loose, we're good to go and work on the bottom end of the car. Okay, now we're under the car. We're gonna remove this front plastic down here. You're just gonna have a couple clips that hold it in all the way down. And then if you look around the inside up here, if you look up there, clip up there, and another one over there. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Okay, once you get the two clips off up there, you have another hidden one in here. And then a couple clips down the front and a 10mm bolt right here. Okay, with all that out, the bottom plastic should pull right down. You can leave it attached over there if you want. You don't have to remove it because the AC compressor is right here. So that, as long as you have the room to pull it right out here, you should be good. All right, next there's this connector that's right here. The top part is the clip that you're gonna remove. You push that in and it'll pull up like that. So you guys can see the top part of that is what you pinch in the tab. And the bottom part of the clip is actually attached to the AC compressor. So when the clip's on there like that, if you're having trouble lifting the top part off, what you can do is pinch the top front part up here with your hand and then get like a flathead or some kind of pick tool, and you can get it right under that connector to help lift it up like that. All right, next, once you have that connector unplugged, you're gonna have two 10mm nuts holding in your high side and your low side line. So this one down here is your low side line, and it's held in by a 10mm nut right here. So we're gonna go ahead and remove that first. All right, now I've seen once you pull these off, there can be some residual oil in there. So just a heads up before you go to remove it. All right, once that nut is off, we're gonna pull it straight down, like so. And then what we're actually gonna do is kind of tuck this line out of the way for when we go to remove the AC compressor. All right, next there's a 10mm bolt right up here holding the low side line in. All right, so the bottom line, this bottom hose here is the high side line. The one that's on top is actually the low side line. Get my 10mm on there. Okay, if you move that connector out of the way, give you some more room. All right, there's your other 10mm bolt for the low side line. All right, once you get that out, you can lift up on the line. It should pop out. Make sure that's set off to the side as well. I'm actually gonna put this high side line above the AC compressor. Okay, next you're gonna have four 12mm bolts holding in the AC compressor to the engine. So there's one down here, and then mirroring that on the top side, you'll have one right here, and then another one right over here. All right, now before we remove the four 12mm bolts that hold the AC compressor in, you just wanna make sure that the belt is off of the pulley. So I did that, just remove the belt. And I'm gonna start with the top two 12mm bolts. We're gonna get those out first. So what I'm gonna do is get a 12mm long socket. All right, there's one bolt, that's 12mm. Now the next one, I just put the socket on there. Since it's already broken free, I can turn it by hand. All right, it's your other one. So both of the top bolts are now out. Now we're gonna get the bottom two 12mm, and once these are out, this AC compressor is gonna fall out. So just make sure you don't drop it on yourself. I'm gonna start with this left 12mm bolt first, and then I'll do the right 12mm bolt. What can also help with these bottom 12s is to get an extension. little rusty. Just came out pretty good. All right, so you can see it's gonna fall loose. So make sure everything is out of the way before you take this last one out. I'm gonna push the high sideline hose up over it so that can be out of the way. I'm gonna go ahead and hold the AC compressor while I take out the last 12mm bolt. All right, with that bolt loose, so there's actually a little hanger on here that does hold it in place. So I can remove that last 12mm. And now to get this out, you're gonna have to lift it up and then pull it out a little bit. So I'm gonna get under it. It's gonna come up off that hanger. Now I could sit it down here and it's free from the car. So you're just gonna have to finagle it out. There we go. And just like that, you'll get the AC compressor out. Like I said before, there could be a little bit of residual oil in the pump itself. So just make sure you have a little rag there to gather that oil up. Now I do want to show you guys, right here and right here are those two hooks that actually hook the AC compressor up into the car. So once those bolts come out, that's what you're lifting them off of. All right, next I'm gonna show you guys the replacement AC compressor. This is the box that it came in. I got this on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description for this. All right, here we have the new AC compressor. It comes with the pulley and the clutch and everything's already installed. The new connector for it. And the only thing that we're gonna have to remove before we install this new one are the plates covering the two high side and the low side lines. And they come with new hardware as well. That looks like a 10mm bolt and a 10mm nut. Just wanted to show you guys a little comparison of these. They're identical. And I do trust Denso, which is the brand for this one. I do trust them a lot. They use a lot of these parts in the cars already. That's why I went with this. I've seen good reviews on it and it was pretty cheap. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and remove these two plates and then get ready to install this in the vehicle. All right, another thing to mention that we're gonna take off is just this zip tie. And that holds this oil balancing warning. And before we go to put this in, those four 12mm bolts that you took off, you're gonna notice that two of them are shorter than the other two. So you can see I have two longer ones. These two longer ones actually go in the top holes, and the two shorter ones go in these bottom holes. So just so you guys know when you're putting it back in. Two long bolts go in the top, two short bolts go in the bottom. All right, we're just gonna prepare this before we get it in there. We're gonna loosen the 10mm nut over here and a 10mm bolt right up here. So we can actually leave this bracket off. And then for the side over here, pull that bracket up, pull that out, and we'll gently put it back in so we don't leak anything when we're installing this again. And then if you want to double check, make sure that this connector right here is fully in. Looks like it is. Read some stuff online that some people had bought in these and they might not have fully been connected and they had issues with their AC compressor. So feels like everything's in there. Before we go to put it in, I want to show you guys these two hooks right here on the top of the AC compressor is what it latches onto the vehicle with. All right, and we're gonna save this hardware for once we get the AC compressor in the vehicle. So let's go ahead and install this in there. All right, we're looking at where the AC compressor goes in, and these two hook spots is actually where the AC compressor will ground to the vehicle. So just make sure you clean these off. You could use some brake cleaner and a wire brush or some rags and just make sure it's wiped clean. And now we're gonna begin to install the new AC compressor. I'm gonna raise up the AC compressor in. I'm gonna turn it this way actually. Have to rotate it as you get it in there. I'm gonna twist it with the pulley side towards the passenger side, and then my hooks are right up here and here. So I'm gonna turn the AC compressor and then lift it up onto those hooks. Let's see. Okay, got both sides in. There you go. That was pretty much how you do it. You kind of have to rotate it in and then slide it up, and then you'll feel the hooks grab on it. And now the 2 bottom bolt holes as well as the 2 top, they line up with the bracket that's on the vehicle, so you can put your bolts in. You're gonna have 4 bolts, 2 long and 2 short. The 2 short ones go on the bottom, so I'm gonna put those in first so we can make sure this is in straight and secure. And I'm gonna do it by hand so I can feel that the threads are good. That one's in. Let's get the other one in. All right, that one's in as well. Now we can go and feed up our 2 top bolts. So I'll feed the top 12mm in. Might have to kind of wiggle the AC compressor a little bit to get them started. All right, and then the last one. See how I'm wiggling it just a tiny bit, and now it's in there. All right, once you get all 4 of those bolts to hold the AC compressor in by hand, you're gonna torque all 4 of them down to 16 foot-pounds. All right, now I got all 4 of the 12mm bolts torqued down to 16 foot-pounds. Now I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall the low side line, which goes onto the top of the AC compressor. You gotta remember now that we gotta pull out that rubber plug. So we pull the rubber plug out, and you're gonna just look at your AC line, make sure that O-ring is good. Get a tiny little bit of oil and put it around that O-ring. And then what we're gonna do is get that line and seat it right in the top, and then install the 10mm bolt. So I'm gonna seat it in there. Grab my new 10mm bolt that came with the new AC compressor. Start that by hand. And if you can, torque that 10mm bolt down to 7.2 foot-pounds. All right, next you can take your high side line. You're gonna install it right where that rubber plug is. So we're gonna pull that out. Same thing, you're gonna get the high side line where this O-ring is. You wanna put a little bit of oil on there before installing it back into the hole. And that's the oil from the AC compressor. Just get a little bit of oil on my finger. Put it around that O-ring. And then you're gonna pop it right in there. You're gonna take your new 10mm nut, feed that on by hand, and torque that down to 7.2 foot-pounds. Now you wanna reach up and grab your connector and reattach that to the new connector on the AC compressor. Reconnect the connector. Hear that little click. That's what tells you it's all the way on. The last part is we're gonna have to reattach the belt. All right, so reattaching this belt, it's gonna be a little tricky for me to show you on camera, but I'm gonna put a belt diagram on the screen, and you'll be able to see the way the belt routes through all of the pulleys. All right, now I'd recommend getting the belt on all the pulleys down below first and leaving it off of the power steering pulley and saving that one for last. I just want to quickly try to explain what I did, my process for getting this serpentine belt back on. So I got my 14mm wrench down there. It's right down there attached to the tensioner pulley. Then I have my 22mm wrench attached to that wrench so I can get some leverage when I go to pull on it to take the tension off where the belt's supposed to go. I made sure that the belt is on all the pulleys on the bottom. So it's on the AC compressor, it's on the drive, everything is already attached. And then I had the belt off here at the top. And what I did was I got the wrench in there like this and pulled on it like that to release the tension. And then I got this belt right onto the top of the power steering last. And then slowly let my wrench go. And that was it. Here's a better angle. So there's the 14mm wrench down there onto the tensioner. And it's a tight squeeze. They actually do make a special wrench for this. It's a long 14mm and it's meant for, you know, pulling on the tensioner. But if you don't have that, like I don't have that, then you can just use a 14mm wrench. On the open end of the 14 is where you would attach the box end of another wrench. In this case, I used a 22, and that gave me enough leverage to pull on it and loosen the tension on the tensioner. So I hope that kind of helped you guys understand. Also what I did, and you're gonna probably have to do this too, is get the power steering reservoir and kind of pull it out of the way so you can get your wrenches in there, and you'll figure it out once you're doing it, but you're gonna see you're gonna have to kind of move this to get enough room to be able to pull on that tensioner. Now we'll be replacing this serpentine belt in another video, so stay tuned for that. But other than that, you guys are good to reinstall the bracket that holds the power steering reservoir. And that should just be 2 10mm bolts. So I'm gonna get my bracket like this. Also, that clip that's attached to it goes around the hose. You can see that right there. So you get your 10 millimeters, put those in, tighten them down, not too tight. All right, got the bracket in there. You're just gonna reconnect your power steering reservoir. Make sure everything's out of the way of the belt, and always double check all the pulleys to make sure the belt is seated in between the ridges on either side. You want to make sure that belt's centered, because if you start this up and the belt's not all the way on one of them, it'll probably destroy your belt and you can mess a couple other things up as well. All right guys, that's pretty much it. That's how you'll install an AC compressor on a 2007 to 2011 Honda CRV. This video also may be relatable with similar year, make and model of the Honda. They're pretty dang similar if you ask me. I've seen and done plenty of them, so if you watch this video, it might actually help you out with like the Civics or the Accords, other year CRVs and stuff like that. Honda Elements, Odysseys, very similar. Now do remember, I'm gonna have to take this car to the dealership or to whoever your other mechanic is that has an AC machine with a license to actually pull a vacuum, make sure there's no leaks, and then fill it up with some oil and some dye, and then charge it up with Freon. So I'm gonna bring this to Honda to kind of let them finish off the rest of it, and then I'll have some working AC. But the AC compressor, you know, I could do it myself, and you could as well. It'll save you a lot of money on labor costs, and right now everything's super expensive. This is a pretty easy fix and repair for your car. If you guys are looking for any of the parts or tools used in this video, there'll be a link down in the description for that. If this video helped you guys out, please leave me a like, because that really helps me out. If you guys have any questions, just please leave me a comment. I will get back to you. And if you guys are looking for more of this kind of content, hit that subscribe button, because there'll be plenty of more content coming your way. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope to help somebody out there. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. All right, keep an eye out for another video coming up on how to just replace the drive belt or serpentine belt. I'm gonna be doing that. And then I'm also gonna be coming out with another video on how to do spark plugs on the Honda CRV. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.